Alright, so this is the homework help video for the 2025 homework of Lesson 7-1. Let's take a look at some examples here. I have number 30, the square root of 63. So, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I am going to use method number 1. I'm going to say equals square root and then determine the two numbers that multiply together to give me 63, where one of them is a perfect square. Okay, so here I have my calculator and I already punched stuff in. I have 63 divided by, and this is where I will punch in a perfect square. And I'm going to say 9, and 9 is a perfect square, right? So you will take the number that's under the square root, put that in your calculator, divide by a perfect square that, of course, is going to be less than 63. So 63 divided by 9, let's see what happens. Great. 63 divided by 9 is 7. 7 is a whole number. It's not a decimal. That's great. What I can do is I will write my perfect square, which I chose 9, right? So I'm going to put 9 here times that little output from the calculator, 9 times 7. So now, let's take a look. Can I take the square root of 9? Yes, I can. Well, let's take a look. The square root of 9 is 3. And that 3 is going to go outside of the radical, right? It's going to go outside of the radical. Can I take the square root of 7? Well, you're going to get a decimal. 7 isn't a perfect square, so it's going to remain under the radical, that little 7 there. Okay, so your answer is 3 root 7. Let's take a look at number 38. So here's the thing. You have negative 7 here. Don't forget that it exists. Negative 7 times the square root of 20 times p to the second. All I'm doing is I'm just separating these two terms with a multiplication sign. Now, let's go ahead and look at this number 20 here. We're going to go ahead and figure out two numbers that multiply together, where one of them is a perfect square. That'll give you 20. So let's try to put this into our calculator here. 20 divided by a perfect square. Let's see. Again, the perfect square must be, of course, less than 20. So let's try 4. We know 4 is a perfect square, right? 2 times 2 is 4. 4 is a perfect square of 2. Great, look at that. That gives me a whole number. That 5 that you see there, that's a whole number. It's not a decimal. So what we can do is we can change this, and now it becomes 4 times 5 times p to the second, okay? So negative 7, right? And then there's my square root. Let's take a look at this. We have the square root of 4, which is what? 2. Where does 2 go? It's going to go outside of the radical, and it's going to get multiplied with the negative 7 there. So put that 2 there. I think I'm going to need some more room, so let me put this square root to the side there. Can I take the square root of 5? No. So that 5 is going to remain under the radical. And the next thing is, can I take the square root of p squared? So if you can take the square root of an even numbered power, right? If you take the square root of an even numbered power, then all you have to do is you do x and then raise it to the even number power, divide by 2. So if I said the square root of x to the 6th power, then your answer is going to be x to the 3rd power, okay? So here's the thing with this one. The square root of p to the 2nd, it's an even number power, so you're going to do 2 divided by 2, which is 1, so it's going to be p to the 1st power, or just p. And where does p go? It's going to go outside. Okay? So I'm going to build my answer, negative 14 p root 5. Negative 14 p root 5. Okay? So that's your answer. Let's take a look at this one right here. 44, the square root of 169 times a to the third times b to the second times c to the fourth. Okay, so let's go ahead and rewrite this as the square root of 169 times a to the third times b to the second times c to the fourth. Okay? All right, so here's the thing about the square root of 169. If you look at your, table of perfect squares, the square root of 169 is 13. 169 is a perfect square, and it's the perfect square of 13. So if I were to take the square root of 169, the 13 is going to go outside of the radical. Okay, it's going to go outside of the radical. I have the square root of a to the third power. Y'all, all we have to do is, if I'm taking the square root of a to the third power, right, what I want are two numbers, or two, objects or quantities or whatever. I need two where one of them is a perfect square. That's, I should say that what is the highest perfect square that goes into a to the third power, if that makes sense. And the trick here is you want to look at this odd numbered power and subtract by 1. So I'm going to write a to the second times a. A squared times a is a to the third power, and this a to the second power here is a perfect square. So if I were to take the square root of that, that's just going to be a, which will go outside of the radical. And then if I take the square root of just a, well, a is not a perfect square. It's going to remain under the radical. Okay, so it's a root a. Okay, let's do another example. If I said the square root of a to the 7th, it's an odd numbered power. You're just going to do a to the 6th times a. So you're just doing one less, if that makes sense, okay? This is a perfect square. This is a perfect square, and this is not, okay? So the square root of a to the 6th power, right? This is an even numbered power, so you're going to divide this by 2. So the square root of a to the 6th is going to be a to the third. Okay, so that's going to be a to the third. And if I were to take the square root of a, well, you can't. So it's going to, well, this a is just going to go under the radical here. Okay? So let's take a look at a to the third. I can rewrite that as a squared times a. We have the square root of b to the second. Okay, so we'll just keep that in mind. And I'm not going to do anything right now. I'm not going to simplify yet. And then we have this c to the fourth here. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and take the square root. So the square root of a to the second, that's just going to be a. So we have 13 times a. I have the square root of a, so that's going to remain under the radical. I think I'm going to need more room. I have the square root of b squared, so that's just going to be b, and it's going to go outside. And lastly, I have the square root of c to the fourth, and if I were to take the square root of that, that's just going to be c to the second. So now I'm going to multiply, and your answer is going to be 13ab c squared root a. Okay? All right. We're good to go.